Once upon a time, there was a husband and wife who'd been married for quite a few years. They were having a quick breakfast. As they were cleaning up, the wife said to her husband, "I bet you don't remember what today is." Put off and a bit insulted, he said, "Of course, honey, I remember." Then he quickly gathered up his things and left for work. About 10 o'clock, a dozen roses arrived at the house. At noon, a box of the wife's favorite chocolates was also delivered. That was followed at 3 o'clock by a new dress from one of her favorite boutiques. The wife was very excited and could not wait for her husband to come home. When he entered, she ran up to him, gave him a hug, and said, "Thank you so very much. First the roses, then the chocolates, then the dress. I never had a better Groundhog's Day." I thought I would begin my homily this morning with some levity because our gospel reading from St. Mark can be very challenging for lots and lots of people. The Pharisees approached Jesus and said, "Is it lawful for a husband to divorce his wife?" When Jesus was here on earth, divorce was quite common among the Jewish people. And so when the Pharisees asked Jesus, "Is it lawful?" that really wasn't the question they were asking him. From the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24, verse 1, we read this. "When a man, after marrying a woman, is later displeased with her because he finds in her something indecent, he writes out a bill of divorce, hands it to her, thus dismissing her from his home." In the time of Jesus, because divorce was quite common, there had developed over the years two schools of thought about what was the meaning of this command in the book of Deuteronomy. Specifically, what did the word indecent mean? Two schools of thought developed. The first school of thought was the school of Shammai, Shammmai. And this school of thought said that the interpretation of the word indecent referred to only one thing, that the wife was unfaithful to her husband. And that would be the only reason why a man could write a bill of divorce and dismiss her from his home. Now, there was a second school of thought regarding the interpretation of the word indecent. This school of thought was the school of Hillel, Hillel. And they had a much wider interpretation of the word indecent. I'm going to give you just a few examples. I'm not making these up. These were reasons for a man writing a divorce for his wife. According to that school of thought, a man could divorce his wife if she burnt his supper. A man could divorce his wife if she talked ill about his family and his parents. A man could divorce his wife if she was a brawling woman, and by that they meant the level of her voice was so loud that the people in the next house could hear her. A man could divorce his wife if he found someone prettier than she was. Now you can imagine with those two schools of thought where most people sort of relied upon. They were all looking at that second school of thought, which is a wider interpretation of the word indecent. And so when the Pharisees came up to Jesus, what they were really asking him was, Jesus, where do you stand? What school of thought do you belong to? And Jesus, in a very typical fashion, doesn't answer directly, but asks them a question. What did Moses command you? And they replied, Moses permitted a husband to write a bill of divorce and dismiss her. And Jesus said, the reason why is because of the hardness of your heart. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. They are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being may separate. Jesus' response to the Pharisees of where he stood on the interpretation of divorce was that it was never part of God's plan. It was never part of God's design. From the very beginning of creation, he made them male and female in such a way that they complement one another. And in that complementing of one another, they become one in commitment, in fidelity, in devotion, in love for one another. From the very beginning of creation, God's design that marriage was forever. And the church continues to preach and proclaim that message. The permanence of the sacrament of marriage. That's the ideal. That's what we hope that every bride and groom strives for on their wedding day and continues throughout their marriage to reach that ideal of becoming one, to complement each other, to grow deeper and deeper in love, commitment, fidelity to each other. Throughout the centuries, up to our own day, thousands and thousands of couples have continued to strive to achieve that ideal. Within our own parish here at St. Vincent de Paul, we have lots of couples who in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, continue to work together to strive for the ideal that marriage is forever. Today we simply thank God for their witness of commitment, their witness of fidelity, their witness of love for each other. But we also know that in our world, in our church, and in our parish, there are individuals for whom the ideal never became a reality. As much as they entered that marriage with that intention, things happen. Sad things happen. Traumatic things happen. And their marriage did not last. That's why today's gospel is also challenging of what Jesus says to the disciples when they ask him to explain this a little bit more. Jesus said, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. What is Jesus saying? How do we interpret these words? It's been difficult from the time Mark put this in his gospel to this present day. Even Matthew was having a difficult time with this section that he took from Mark's gospel and placed in his own. He added a little phrase. He said, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery unless the marriage is unlawful. So he put a little caveat in there. And for generations, we've been trying to figure out what does that all mean. There are some people who believe that if a person gets divorced, they are excommunicated from the church. Wrong. They are not. In fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches us that when that happens in a person's life, that's when they most need the church to help them in that pain, that hurt, that feeling of being a failure, all the other emotions that go with the reality of divorce in one's life. They are not excommunicated. They are part of the church. And the church invites the ministers of the church especially to reach out to them and to help them through this difficult time in their life. There are also some people who believe that if a person divorces their wife and then marries another without that previous spouse dying or going through the process of annulment, they are excommunicated from the church. Wrong. They are not. And once again, the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches us, especially the ministers of the church, to reach out in a healing and a compassionate way, so that couple, those individuals, do not feel alienated by the church, alienated from God, alienated from Jesus Christ. But we are to do everything we can to walk with them, to journey with them, to help them to know that they are still loved by God, still saved by Jesus' church, and still cherished by the church, even though they have this, what we would call, an irregular situation. Deacon Dan Paulo and I are both advocates of the tribunal in Orlando. Deacon Dan and I work with individuals who are divorced and remarried, helping them to bring healing and wholeness into their lives. Since I've been here, I've submitted 12 cases here from our parish that have been completed, and everything has been put back in the sense that the second marriages were convalidated, and the couples now can fully receive all the sacraments of the church. At the present time, I have 16 cases at various stages of the process in Orlando right now. The process of the annulment can be difficult, but as a priest for almost 40 years, I've seen it can be very healing for individuals as they go through it. And so I invite anyone who might be in a situation like that to see either myself or Deacon Dan, so that we can share with you what can and possibly be done. It's hard to make any general statements from the pulpit because every case is unique. Every case is somewhat different. And so we just need to sit down and reflect and pray and listen and see how we can respond. The reason I say this is because the last part of today's gospel, Jesus tells us how to respond to people who feel like they're not wanted, that they don't belong. St. Mark talks about people bringing their children to Jesus to have them touch them, but the disciples rebuke the people for doing that. Get away, don't bother Jesus with these little people. They're a nuisance, they're a bother, they don't count. We need to remember that when the word children is used in the scriptures, it doesn't refer just to children of chronological age, but that term children refers to anyone and everyone who feels like they're nobody, that they're rejected, unwanted, shamed, and shunned. In today's gospel, Jesus says, no one should ever feel that way. No matter what we have done or didn't do, God still loves us 100%. No matter what we've done or didn't do, Jesus Christ has saved us and wants us to be with him forever in the kingdom of his Father. And today, as we listen to this gospel, Jesus is telling us, the church, especially the ministers of the church, don't shun, don't shame, don't rebuke, don't ignore, don't turn away individuals who divorced and remarried, but rather reach out, walk with, pray with, help as best you can. Let the children come to me. Let the little ones come to me. Let those who feel alienated and rejected come to me. Do not prevent them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these.